Hello and welcome to CPX Cyber Bytes. I'm Juliet Nichols, and in today's episode, we will dive into the evolution of the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, and how this role has transformed from a behind the scenes technical lead into a trusted advisor at the boardroom table. We'll explore how CISOs are navigating cybersecurity risk, building trust with stakeholders, and shaping strategic business decisions. What skills and mindsets today's CISOs need to succeed, and we'll close things out with a fun hack or fact lightning round to test their takes on the shifting CISO landscape. Let's jump in. Joining me are two fantastic guests, Saqib Chaudhry, the field CISO at CPX, and Najyb AlMaskari. I'm told that the role of the CISO has come a long way. It's gone from being kind of ticking compliance boxes and managing incidents to being really in the boardroom supporting the C-suite. In your experience, how has that changed? Am I on the right track? Are things a little bit different to that? Tell me about your experience.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely on the right track. Now, if I look at my experience, so I started my IT career in late 90s. And being the network and systems administrator, one of my many responsibilities was security. So security predominantly was not, at that time, was not a function, a dedicated function. So security was just, one of the things you did. And then the decision-making of security was also just curtailed within the IT department. Most of the time, it did not leave the IT department. Whatever decisions you needed to make, you made within IT, you implement, you move it forward. The other thing I remember was the scale and magnitude of the cyber attacks and cyber threats were manageable. And if I fast forward to now, 2025, cyber security risks is one of the top 10, if not top 5, risks for any enterprise across the board. The other interesting thing is the magnitude of the cyber threat and attacks have quadrupled to a point where it could be crippling, especially ransomwares. It could be crippling for the organizations. Organizations can even go out of business. So that magnitude has exponentially increased. And then CISOs, they're no longer seen as just security leaders. They're seen as the enterprise risk architects. They're seen as the enabler for digital trust. And then they're seen as strategic business partners. It's now more on how well the CISOs can understand the business end to end, how well they can communicate the technical aspects of security into a business language that can be understood across the organization. And to your point, now, because the board of directors have fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the top enterprise risks are getting managed by the C-suite of the organization, they are now asking questions about cybersecurity from the CISOs. Some of the areas they're interested in at the board level is how well the security organization, in comparison to or benchmark against peer organizations, how well is the security set up in their respective organizations? How well are we doing in terms of reducing the threat landscape? And then how well are we doing in terms of return on investments for every dollar invested into cybersecurity? How well are we doing in terms of both tangible and intangible returns? So what that now, now the requirement for CISO in this age is to be agile, is to have foresight, and to be able to influence all the way up to the board.
It's fascinating stuff. Najib, would you agree? Is there anything that you would add? How have you seen it evolve?
My career starts a little earlier in the 90s. I won't go how much earlier in the 90s, but a little bit earlier. And very much the same kind of experience. Information technology and information security were one and the same. The IT geeks, you guys handle it and fix it. We don't want to know about it. Our web server's down, go fix it. That was it. Our email's not working, fix it. They don't want to know the details. They didn't care about the details. And if there was an impact to the services, most business wasn't being done online anyway. All right. Maybe we're getting emails from customers or whatever else. Yeah. Jump forward, coming up on 30 years. And with that in mind, you're now looking at everything is enabled. All right. Every device is connected in some way to the cloud or to the internet. Everything is hyper focused on-time deliverables. No one's willing to wait even a few seconds not to connect. All right. You have the demand that you need to have authentication. You have to have speed. You have to have clarity on what are your communications. All these things are, even though there are multiple teams underneath it, if anything fails, the first person I look to is a security incident. So with that in mind, the structures have changed. And as Saqib said, during the evolution of the Chief Information Security Officer role has been significant over time. And structures in how they report, they used to report to, let's say there was an information security officer, they report to an IT manager. And they realize there's some cross-functional issues. So if the information security officer is calling out the IT manager, he's like, oh no, you don't know out my problem. So they're like, okay, let's have him report up to whoever the executive is there. And now in many organizations, the Chief Information Security Officer reports either directly to the CEO or to the board, all right, acting like an audit function, all right. In fact, in one of the organizations I used to work for, I was the director of audit as well, and information security report up to me as well as financial audit. And we report to the audit committee, which is outside. And the CEO was on the audit committee, but he was not the only person. Stakeholders were there as well. So we had independence of reporting to be able to hold different parts of the organization account. With that in mind, as you mentioned, fiduciary liability. So there was a significant international incident called the Enron scandal. All right, if you remember, sometime back. A result of this is there came up a standard called Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a financial liability standard. And effectively what it meant was if there is malpractice from anyone who's in the C-suite, either CFO, CTO, CEO, all right, they are personally liable. Their personal assets are liable to be sued against, right? And that also came down later on, a few years later, when they had not appointed a Chief Information Security Officer for Sony Corporation. And there was a significant hit to the organization where many users' credit card information and financial data was exposed. After investigation, they discovered that there wasn't a CISO appointed. And so the C-suite was hit with those direct financial penalties, which woke up the entire industry. Sony's not a small company. All right, internationally renowned. It was a big hack that at the time it was a PlayStation hack on the back end. But people managed to exfiltrate credit card information, are I think a few million users at the time. And this became a significant driver for organizations to change. Sarbanes-Oxley it was a US standard. It was adopted by Europe and then international. And so here in the UAE, we have Sarbanes-Oxley as well. All right. So if you are, as a board member, you are not implementing the proper security controls, you are putting yourself not only at the organization's financial liability, but at your own personal financial liability. Now that sobers up the conversation quite a bit amongst the C-suite. With that, there are certain assurances that people want, as Saqib mentioned, to go into the details of how an organization is structured, the reporting queues, knowing that we have the best technology in place, understanding where we are as far as what is the risk profile, not only to the organization, but to the sector, geopolitical risks. So the reports we get are a lot closer to what you would find almost in a physical security assessment, as if you had individuals, VIPs, that you were trying to keep safe in a certain area. You would understand what the geopolitical risk is, what the sector risk is, what the local risk is, how the organization is being targeted. And then specifically, the individuals in the organization. Is someone trying to steal the C-suite's
credentials? Are they trying to transact with them? Are they trying to steal their likenesses and communicate with other organizations? So all this becomes a part of the CISO's remit: brand management, deep web protection, financial and fiduciary protection, insurance, because we do have insurance, right? And the CISO is responsible for ensuring that to the insurance organizations that everything is reported properly. If there's any deviation, the insurers won't pay. So we have to come back with significant reporting, and then we have audits to the regulators. So from a healthcare perspective, we report up to the Department of Health, all right, as a regulator. Other organizations within the UAE report up to their government departments, and they have a responsibility to inform the regulator of any potential risks.
Given the evolution of the CISO role, I'm intrigued to know how communicating all of this information to the board, to the C-suite goes. And I'd love to know, let's stick with you, Najyb. I'd love to know some of the kind of the most critical risks that you and CISOs are dealing with right now, and how you go about communicating that to the people you need to communicate it to.
So I'll give you a little bit about the evolution. So just nested questions in what you just put forward. It starts out with essentially we're looking at give us a report once a month. Everything's okay. That's great. That's like the late 90s, early 2000s. If we get a monthly report that everything's fine, great, we're okay. Nowadays, the C-suite and the executive team wants up to the second reporting. They want to be able to see exactly what's happening on the premise. They want dashboards that can illuminate this. And then they want the complexity as well to be taken away so they can understand it. So Saqib can confirm this, that there's just a massive amount of data that we bring in from multiple sources, all right? And essentially we call them sensors, all right? So they're embedded in the network protocols, they're embedded in communication protocols, they're embedded on servers, and they're embedded in the cloud. And all these sensors bring data together and aggregate them in what we call a security incident event manager solution. And that solution usually has behavioral analysis on top of it, which then produces a massive amount of data and then works against a number of use cases of behavioral analysis. The outcome is pretty much what your expression is right now. People's eyes glaze over and they go, what? And then so when we try and tell them that it's a particular use case that can have remote code execution on their Apache server, all right, which then may present an issue for credentialing in the future, they'll go, what does that mean? And if I say, look, the web server can be hacked into and someone can get admin access, oh, I understand that, right?
Yeah.
So this is where you have to have that translation there, and also education for the C-suite is super important to be able to take the information at face value and not have to have an explanation behind your dashboard. So meaningful dashboards and the amount of time, there's zero tolerance for any delays, right? Everyone wants it right now. It's just like when you're opening an app, it's become the norm. We need to have it immediately, right? What's the information? And if we need to do a detailed report, the expectation is usually a few hours before we get the report back out, right? It used to be we could take a week, do a deep dive. Now we expect it end of business. If it happens at end of business, we expect it a couple hours, right? So whatever the case may be, the call it the tolerance for accepting either an impact to the systems or a facility to wait is just not there anymore. The tolerance for that is gone. So, and at a leadership level, you have to understand now people are fiduciary responsibility for this. They let their own personal accountability. If it's not being done right, they have concerns, right? So I understand as part of working in the sector for going on 30 years now and seeing all this transformation. Transformation has been huge across the space. And as part of that, I get where people are coming from. And now with AI-enabled tools, with the services that we get from various managed services providers, systems integrators, we are at a point where we can do this, right? The capacity is there, but it has shifted significantly in what it used to be to where it is right now.
Yeah, thank you. It's a fascinating insight, and the context is really important, isn't it? Would you agree, Najyb? And are there any specific risks that you or CISOs in general are trying to convey right now to that C-suite board?
Let me start with, so I agree, Najyb, absolutely. Dashboards are absolutely important, and frequency is also equally important. Now I think we're getting into near real-time dashboarding, right? So at least at the CISO level, right, to see what is going on in the environment, so then you can make dynamic decisions or for dynamic decision making as needed. But so that's a CISO level. But if I start from the board or director perspective, what are they usually interested in? So there are few aspects. So first of all, they want to know in terms of benchmarking, where does the organization stand? So there are benchmark studies that can be done, and boards sometimes they'll just initiate their own benchmarking study to see from a threat landscape perspective and how well the threat environment is contained. They can actually, or cybersecurity maturity as a whole, they can see where their organization fits in comparison to the peer organizations, either regionally or globally. So that's one. The other thing from a reporting perspective is the financial viability. How well we doing in terms of ensuring that every dollar we spend or dirham we spend, there is value out of this, value out of it. Now, there are different ways of doing it. One of the benchmarks is you take the cybersecurity budget as a percentage of overall IT budget, and then you benchmark that percentage against peer organizations and see where you stand. The other couple of aspects from a board perspective they're interested in is if a major incident happens, especially for the industry that the organization is, what were the lessons learned? And were those lessons or learning that we got from those lessons, did we take action if action was required in terms of, proactively looking for the weaknesses that were exploited in that incident, and what were the action taken, and then how well can we fare against a similar incident if that happens, and not only from a preventative perspective, but also are we prepared if that incident materializes in our environment? Are we prepared to respond in the best manner possible, and if so, how quickly we'll be able to get back to business? So that's at the board level, works well on the C-suite level as well. One other thing is simulation exercises or tabletop exercises. Also a very good way for the C-suite and boards to understand the complexity and the magnitude of what goes into defending and recovering from a cyber attack. And lastly, because one of the weakest links, and maybe we can start from a risk perspective, is the human aspects, right? Because a lot of the adversaries, they look for weaknesses in human interactions with machines, and they try to exploit it. It's also very beneficial for organizations to have, or CISOs to have, information security forums where they can invite business leaders across other verticals or departments and talk about the risk of security in terms of business terms. So if a threat materializes, what impact could be, for example, for finance, for the CFO area? What impact could it be on the supply chain procurement, and so on and so forth?
Okay, I mean, it strikes me that the role of CISO requires a huge amount of trust. And you've mentioned some strategies, but are there any other strategies that you employ or that CISOs generally employ to build that trust and that influence, across the board?
So yes, absolutely. A large part of it is being able to communicate clearly to the stakeholders, and they need to understand. Usually when they understand what's going on in a transparent fashion, and again, it can't be something where we're talking in a technical language, they have to grasp it. So analogies are very useful to be able to communicate that information across, but also when we can communicate it as potential risk to the organization's either function and or financial situation that may be impacted. In the UAE, we have the benefit that the regulators have been very proactive, all right? And so they have their own standards, which they have given outside of just standard international things that you put across, like ISO 27001 or GDPR. We have our ADHIC standard, which has been developed within the country to be able to ensure that we have healthcare standards across Abu Dhabi entities. With that in mind, healthcare entities, right? So with that in mind, it's very important that we work closely with the regulators to ensure that these controls are in place, and it also gives trust to our board members that we're complying with both international and local standards. And the regulators come to audit us at least once a year, and then we also do mock events. We They have a quarterly reporting structure. They scan our internal infrastructure every quarter as well. We work very closely with them to ensure that's the case. So part of it is not only building up trust with the board and the stakeholders, and the executive team, but also with the regulators.
Saqib, would you agree? Anything to add?
Absolutely. Right. So I think so if I move on to the risk side of things, um, AI now is on everybody's mind, right? So so the risk has two aspects. One of them is the protection of the AI ecosystems, right? So that's that risk, because um, the more and more reliance organizations have currently and will have in the future, the risk of protecting the whole ecosystem of the AI. And then the other risk is cyber adversaries using AI and autonomous malware to compromise systems in a matter of minutes, which used to take days. So AI is the use of AI and the protection of AI. I would put it in the top, 5.
Absolutely. So I would say I agree with him entirely. So there's the two factors which Sop had mentioned, and colloquially it's securing your AI assets and then AI for security. So the only thing that's really capable of being able to counter a malicious AI attacker is to have an AI threat intelligence suite, right? And there are several of them that many vendors have. I know that we're working with many esteemed institutions, we won't name it, like CPX, all right, to develop these and have them on site. Part of that means that we have the core understanding of what's happening on a real-time basis, because keep in mind that the AIs don't sleep. They're running all the time. And when you have significant investment in them by either organized crime institutions or rogue states, there's a continuous amount of pressure on the infrastructure of the facility, whether it's a hospital or a bank or whatever else. So as part of that, being able to have that threat protection in place. And then, as you mentioned, also knowing what you're deploying inside your environment and having the AI orchestration tools to be able to ensure that your data doesn't go where it's not supposed to go. And again, our regulators are very strict about where the data is supposed to reside and where it's supposed to move. And so we work very closely hand in glove with them. And then we have our reporting suites that hopefully weld all this together. Again, the AI space is evolving very quickly. So what I say today may not be true in a week. All right. But the principles are there.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. So we've talked about trust, influence, the obvious technical skills you both possess. Are there any other skills that you think are really essential when we're thinking about business leadership in this space?
Communication skills.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. The main difference that you'll find between different levels of maturity within an information security professional is their ability to communicate clearly to senior stakeholders. All right. The skill sets for the SMEs, I don't fault them at all. They're very well qualified. All right, I do my best to try and keep up, all right, with the skill sets that are necessary. But more often than not, what really differentiates is your ability to be able to take the salient points out of any given issue and then be able to communicate that clearly to the stakeholders so that we can get a decision made or they can back a decision that has been made.
Equally important is mindset.
Absolutely.
So one of the, from a mindset perspective, struggles have been between CISOs and the stakeholders is, should security be an enabler or should it act like as a barrier? Right. So an analogy would be it's the easiest thing police can do is ask everybody to stay home, and then the street crime will drastically drop. But the real value of policing is to make sure that the streets are safer for everybody to move around as freely as possible. Definitely, you have to take reasonable, measures as an individual. Don't walk in dark alleys and whatnot. Just do, common sense precautions. So similarly, for CISOs, how can you ensure that your stakeholders are able to do things using technology as efficiently as possible while feeling safe? And that requires, I think technology is there, but the mindset has to be there to match it.
Okay, interesting stuff. We're going to change direction slightly now and think about the future of the CISO role. So, what evolution do you foresee in the CISO role? I'm intrigued to know. And also, what kind of challenges or opportunities might come along with that?
No matter what your function in an organization, AI will be part of it. Whether you are working in the finance department, admin department, human capital, or information technology, to become at least a functional specialist in AI will be required. So CISOs will need to become very fluent in the delivery of AI, not just in the perspective of securing AI and the flip side of the equation, AI for security for organization, but to be able to communicate the risks of misaligned AI, the risks of data exfiltration, the risks of adopting a model to the stakeholders. So before they decide this is a new hot model and we implement it, what are the potential risks to the organization for doing so? Because appetite for artificial intelligence is at an all-time high and only likely to grow. With that in mind, to secure the organization, we don't want to be the bottlenecks, but we do want to be the good shepherds.
So if AI did not replace CISOs in the next couple of decades, and CISO still remains a human function, I think what CISOs need to focus on, we talk about skills as well, and those skills like communication will not go, out of fashion or whatever we want to call it. But AI, robotics, quantum, and data sovereignty, they're all here to stay. And these smart technologies will define the next decade or two. So start investing time and energy from now, so they're able to better tackle these challenges for future.
I think it sounds like an amazing evolution of the role. And you've mentioned some skill sets and some technical skills that are going to be really essential. Are there any other skills that you see being really important and are important now to the CISO role?
Absolutely. So being able to translate strategic directives of the organization and to inspire your team and engage your team towards delivery of that is critical. Thing to understand in an information technology perspective is there's multiple streams of technology, and there's database engineers. You've got for example, your electronic medical records specialists that manage particular bespoke systems. You have people that manage clinical engineering systems that are very bespoke or focused. They all have different specialities, but bringing them together to be able to ensure their vulnerabilities, make sure that they're being managed properly, reporting clearly, ensuring that we have proper layers of protection, defense, and depth across the organization. This requires coordination, it requires inspiration, it requires patience, and it requires engagement. And the engagement piece, I think, is one key factor that cannot be understated. All right? And we're very blessed, I think, in that we have a very engaged team.
Fantastic. Saqib, last word from you on any skills and evolution, in the evolution of the role?
So I agree with Najyb that CISOs, if they're not already, will have to work with the CEOs, the chief digital officers, the chief technology officers, the COOs, the CFOs, to co-create digital trust and digital transformation journeys, and take a role as the enabler for those journeys and digital trust.
Okay, let's move on to the game. So we're going to have a fun rapid fire round. This is going to be quick, of hack or fact. So all you're going to do is shout out hack or fact. We're going to pay you guys. You're going to be your own teams. We're going to find a winner here. I'm going to read you out a statement and you're going to tell me, is it a hack or is it a fact? Okay, first one. 10 years ago, most CISOs reported directly to the CEO.
Hack.
Okay, this is a rapid fire, so, okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
1 point.
Fair enough.
Second one. Today's CISOs need to understand business risk as well as cyber risk. I love it. Okay. Cybersecurity budgets are usually determined by IT with little board input.
No. That's definitely hack.
Yeah, okay. We're touching on some of these points and we're just reiterating here, which is wonderful. Okay. Strong communication skills are just as critical as technical skills for modern CISOs. Love it.
You got that one. I think,
Yeah.
no, it was simultaneous.
Tight.
Tayo.
Okay, last one. Board typically view CISOs as operational staff, not strategic advisors. Interesting. Do you want to battle that one out?
So let me throw one out to you. I think more boards need to have the education to be able to understand the full risks of the role. All right. And in many cases, they see CISOs as an IT function rather than as an organizational risk function. And as to Saqib was saying very clearly, there may be more mature organizations that absolutely do. Because I think that the majority of the organizations and small and medium businesses don't recognize that fact. And that's why they are more at risk than other organizations.
I tend to agree again. It depends on the maturity of the organizations. But I think as the magnitudes of attack and the impact increases, more and more organizations at the board level will have to trust in there.
A big thank you to Saqib and Najyb for sharing such sharp insights on how CISOs are driving business conversations and not just security ones. And thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast for more episodes, and we'll see you next time.